So, welcome to WCCF Tech, and can you introduce yourself for our viewers?
Yeah, I'm Matthias Worch. I'm a design director at Hangar 13. We're working on Mafia 3.
That's great. So, to start off, can you tell us a bit about the relationship between Vito, Scaletta, and the protagonist of Mafia 3? Because Vito is kind of the bridge, between Mafia 2 and Mafia 3.
Yeah, Vito returns from Mafia 2. We kind of know what happened to him. We've actually seeded some of these ideas on social media, but he's in New Bordeaux now, our version of New Orleans. He was pretty much a made man at the end of Mafia 2, and there's some falling out between him and Sal Marcano, who's this big Italian crime boss who's actually running New Bordeaux. We have to figure out exactly why, but he's one of the three underbosses that Vito pretty much gathers around him. There's this inciting incident, which was shown in our Gamescom trailer this year, where we actually see that there's a fallout between the black mob and the Italian mob, and ultimately the black mob is betrayed and Lincoln is left for dead. So Lincoln is looking for criminals in the city who might dislike Marcano just as much as he does. So he's going out of his way to recruit these three guys. Vito is one of them. We also have Cassandra, the voodoo queen, and we have Burke, who's the head of the Irish mob. And they form this really unlikely relationship and this really unlikely family. As to exactly what happens to Vito in this story, like if he's going to be one of the main guys ruling the city with Lincoln, that's very much up to the player, because the player then has the choice to pretty much distribute the entire city across her underbosses. And if Vito is the choice, that's one choice you can make.
All right. So, at the start of the game, at least, they're not friends, Vito and Lincoln. They're just unlikely partners.
Yeah, exactly. It's very much it's this uneasy alliance, which you see very often in the mafia. All of these are hardened criminals. The way that Lincoln gets these guys on board is to pretty much promise them that they're going to rule the city, that they are going to get a lot of the criminal rackets which are in the city. Problem is, he's pretty much making that promise to all three of them, and then you're going to have these sit-downs where you're gathering in this abandoned mansion. It's somewhere in the middle of the bayou. Everybody's sitting together and they're constantly negotiating. They're trying to bribe Lincoln. They're trying to actually get as big of a piece of the pie as they can.
So you can choose.
You have to choose, and you have to try to keep all of them happy. And if you don't do that, like for Vito, for example, if you promise him the city, but then you're giving all of your rackets to Cassandra or to Burke, which might be beneficial to you because these guys have associates, guys that you pretty much unlock that can help you on your quest, like Muscle, who can come and fight along the way, or Burke has police dispatcher in his pocket, so he can actually control and call off the cops. You might make a decision that you don't really want the kind of stuff that Vito can give to you, and if you keep disappointing him, at some point he's going to walk. He's going to say, you know what, I'm not getting out of this agreement, what you promised me, and sorry, Lincoln Clay, now we have another problem, and you have Vito and Marcano both fighting against.
That's cool. I didn't know that, so that's nice. So, of course, the new city is New Bordeaux, and compared to the previous city in Mafia 2, is it any bigger in size?
I honestly don't know. There's Nathan Cheever, who's our lead world designer, who might actually be able to give you stats and figures. The way that we really looked at this city is the way we knew we had exactly the right size we needed to, is to kind of look at New Orleans, which is the inspiration behind it. Look at all of the different facets of that city, which is really interesting, really has a whole bunch of opposing contrasts, right? Like it's a party town, it's a tourism town, so people celebrate Mardi Gras, but it's also a industrial town with lots of cargo ships coming in and so on. Looking at all of those aspects and seeing how we represent them in our version in Bordeaux. And that's how we came up with these 10 districts that we have in the game now. So we have the Bayou, which is the swampland around. That's where the Dixie mob is situated. That's also where alligators are roaming the water. And then we have 9 actual districts, which either have population. You might have the black, poor neighborhood. You might have the white, suburban neighborhood. And then, of course, you have downtown, which we showed today. That's where Tony DeRazio is controlling the mob, French Ward, and so on. And so, ultimately, that's exactly the size of the city we wanted to. And then we wanted to make sure that it actually has a high density of things to do, right? Because you don't want to have a big world, but then it's empty. We want to make sure it has exactly the right distribution of things that you get to do.
All right, so that's one thing fans asked, if there are any side activities that you can talk about, like that you can do.
Yeah, so for one, as you're just looking into the open world, we want to make sure that we're really using it this game, because this was one of the complaints of one area where we knew we could improve over Mafia 2, where we actually want to make sure we have an open world and you actually get to do things in the world. So for one, we want to make sure that the way that the story actually unfolds and the way that you're slowly dismantling Salma Khan's crime racket is very much integrated into the open world. So a whole bunch of things you find in the open world are actually story related. They might be like the actual rackets seeping into the city, seeping into the backyards. So as you've seen today, or if you even remember our E3 demo, so we have Salma Khan at the very top, right? And then we have Uncle Lou, which we saw at E3. So there's this riverboat where you go up to Lou Marcano. Lou Marcano now has his manager, Tony DeRazio, which we met just now. And there's this hierarchy going on already. And if you then go all the way into a backyard, you actually see how Tony DeRazio's men are making money and how all of that money is slowly flowing upwards into Salma Khan's pocket. So as you're going through the city and you're just finding random backyards, you pretty much can chart your own journey. You see the actual mafia rackets taking place there, people getting extorted, people getting bribed and so on. So a big part of the city is not actually, it's optional in that we don't have an opinion on what you want to do, but it's all story relevant, it's all like actually main progression relevant. So you get to do that. And then there's actual side activities on top of that as well, where you might want to do favors for Vito, for example. You might want to run contraband for him. You might have stolen wares. Cassandra has weed coming in the bayou, for example, right? Where from Cuba there's a plane flying in, dropping all of those like packets of weed, which you then pick up and bring back to her. Vito might have some sort of like favors that he asks, because he might want to know what happened to Joe from the second game, and he has some hints, but you might actually be the person to help him. So those side activities are then distributed along the world as well.
So I was wondering, with open world games, lately they are using something like random events in the game to shake up things a little. Is there anything like that in Mafia 3?
I think our game has a very handcrafted feeling. Like it's very important to us. This is what Mafia has always been known for. It's a really good story told really well and cinematically. So we want to make sure that things don't feel as if they don't have care taken into them.
All right.
Under the hood, yes, there might be some systems that we use to make things easier for us, to make sure that we can actually populate the game at such a high density. But I don't think it's not a talking point, right? That's not something that I'd ever want the player to actually notice. The important part is that this city feels densely populated and all makes sense. It's a real simulated world that would exist even if the player wasn't playing.
All right. So you said in an interview, I think some months ago, that Lincoln can get in trouble, if he gets into places where black people are not supposed to be. Mm-hmm. What happens then? I mean, is he chased by the police? How does that work?
Yeah, we have pretty much tried to simulate, and this would happen both just in the open world when you're playing the game. We also have specific missions where, in the mission it's mission dependent. There's a mission, for example, where you're infiltrating the White Country Club, and it's like the perfect Downton Abbey episode because you're hanging out with all of the black servants in the back. And then you're pretty much sneaking in as a black servant, eavesdropping on all these white, well-to-do people. But in the city itself, or the underlying systems behind it, just support people getting offended by what Lincoln might be doing. So we have persistent cops which are patrolling the streets. They're just roaming around. If they notice you committing a crime, they're going to come after you. But if there's no cop around and just a pedestrian gets offended by something you're doing, they're going to run to a phone booth, they're going to call the cops, and then the cops are going to arrive. And now, depending on where you are in the city, they're going to get offended easier or harder. So if you're in Cielo Hollow, which is this poor neighborhood, generally, it's very vibrant, like there's a lot of people really living life, enjoying life, but it's where the black people live. People are not really going to care about what you do. And even when the cops are called, they're probably going to take their sweet time. But if you're in Frisco Fields, which is this white suburban utopia where all of the whites live, people might get offended way easier just by your presence. And the kind of things you can get away with, let's just say you have a gun drawn and you're walking around with it in the city. Maybe nobody cares while you're in Cielo Hollow because people know you. you know you're not a threat. But people in the white neighborhood might get offended way quicker, and they might panic and start calling the cops on you very quickly.
Okay, since you touched on the cops, the community wants to know a bit how the police system works. I mean, is there a wanted level? Can you say anything about that? How does it work?
So what's interesting about this game is that you're playing a black guy in 1968 in the South of America, right? So this is when segregation officially was over, but especially in the southern parts of America, that wasn't really the case. So the cops are going to act very harshly, or they're going to pretty much shoot without prejudice if they feel that you have done something that you shouldn't be doing. As I just explained, the way it actually works is just it's very proactive, or you can be very proactive about it, in that we don't just have cops arriving after you've done something. If a cop is patrolling and he notices you doing something, they're going to come after you right there and then. If you're not there, then pedestrians might be calling the cops on you. Very much depends on exactly who's watching you. You then have tools like with Worch, where you can then control the cop response. You might, for example, say, hey, I have enough money to bribe the police department in this district. You're going to call your contact at the police department, and they're going to call off the cops, and you can actually do what you want to do. But you actually have to be pretty powerful, right? You actually have to have risen through the ranks. You have to make sure that your lieutenant, like your underboss in this case, Worch, has enough power and enough influence over the city to do that. And so then there is a wanted system in that the more serious the crime, the bigger the police response, and you'll actually see there's just actual areas in the game which it pretty much shows you how big the search area is in which people are looking for you.
Okay, so I had a quick question about the demo we just saw. We saw Lincoln using a stealthy approach. But it was all lethal. Is there a chance to do non-lethal approach, or is that something that is not looking to do since he is exacting revenge?
Yeah. What's interesting about these demos is that I never know exactly how that one was played. I'm glad somebody chose. See, we also have the assault way, right? So somebody might have gone in there and just shot everybody when you actually see a completely different part of the hotel at that point. This you could have played stealthily all the way through. I don't know how far the demo player got in this case, but if you could get all the way to Tony without anybody actually noticing you. Then there is a switch that we have in the game where you can switch to non-lethal takedown specifically. So yes, Tony, he has a freaking camera outside, so, and he's been expecting you at that point, so he'll probably notice you when, at that point. You're not going to sneak up on him. But to that point, yes, you could have non-lethally slowly taken out every single person before you get there.
Okay, just a few more questions then. Okay, can you give me an estimate on how much it will take to complete, the main story and things like that?
It's difficult because everybody plays the game differently. Like, we actually have people coming in and testing the game for us from start to finish. And there's some people who just go through the story, and there's some people who find all of Playboy Max because that's more important to them. But they really like doing that, right? So we have Playboy back in the game, and actually what's interesting is that we license articles this time around. So you don't just get the pictures, but you actually get articles from the time, and you get to read about what was going on in the 60s. So the playtime right there, somebody might be reading an article for about an hour. I think what I would say, because it's hard to pinpoint, is that we initially did all of our playtests for a week because we want people to play, and we just realized that nobody was getting to the end of the game. We weren't actually getting experiences from the end of the game. We wanted people to finish it and actually have them help us test it. So we had to extend our playtests to be a week and a half or so at least. Exactly how long it then took them to play and what they did and whether they just went wide or went very narrow and when they did what, that's going to be up to everybody. But I think there's a lot of, it's going to take a while to get through everything.
Okay, and you have announced a season pass, right?
We've announced, so we have a pre-order right now, so you're going to get some really cool weapons and cars out of that. That does include a season pass. We haven't actually talked about details for the DLC yet. I think right now we really want to focus on this game coming out on October 7, and then there will be DLC, and we'll discuss those details when the game is out.
Okay, so a couple just technical questions, if you don't mind. On the consoles, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, what are your target resolution and frame rate?
I don't know, if we talk about that in detail. I mean, I think the important part really is that it looks good. It's going to run smoothly. And I mean, all of these consoles have certain, these all are HD consoles, so it's going to run. It's going to run at that resolution. And then for PC, I think this is where Brian could actually, I don't know if we've officially released any sort of like system requirements. I don't know what our official requirements are.
Okay.
But if it runs on a console, it's going to run on the PC.
The PC version is going to be specially crafted, I mean, with higher resolutions, higher graphical options.
You'll be able to, it's a PC version, there are quality presets in the game, you can say.
Okay, that's more than enough.